Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, which will look at how financial institutions can ensure they are using the highest quality data for AI. My name is Mark McCord. I'm the editor of Data Management Insight here at 18 Group, and I'll be moderating this webinar. Before we get started, I'd just like to share some events that we have coming up in the next couple of months. You can see them at the bottom of your page there. You can register to attend the Data Management Summit London, which is our showcase DMI event in Europe, and that will take place next week. A week later, on March 27, we have our next DMI webinar, which will look at unstructured data. And in May, we will hold a webinar on best practice approaches to data management for regulatory reporting. Today's webinar is titled Prefixed in Data We Trust. And that's because with good quality data, there can be no good, without good quality data, there can be no good quality AI outputs. Explaining why and much else aside will be our guest speakers, Marla Dans, formerly Head of Data Management and Governance at Chicago Trading Company, Alpesh Doshi, Managing Partner at Redcliffe Capital, and Mike Pickett, Director Technical Sales at Informatica. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a moment, but first let me introduce you to Slido, the audience participation app we'll be using today. On the right of your screen, you'll see two panels during this webinar. One is for audience polls, which we'll be running three today, and I'll let you know when they're coming up. Do please take part in them so we can gauge your interest in the topic we're talking about today. There will also be a panel for your pressing questions, and you can type those in whenever you like. We'll take a break during proceedings to answer as many of those as we can. Now, let's go to our speakers. And Marla, please, if you wouldn't mind, introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your interest in this topic.
Oh, yes. Thanks, Mark. So my name is Marla Dans. I'm so pleased to be here today. I love this topic. As you mentioned, most recently, Chicago Trading. I'm a hands-on chief data officer. I'm obsessed with ROI and stakeholder engagement, my favorite parts. But I have to say the title of this event, In Data We Trust, really spoke to me because after, establishing chief data office programs, multiple times, I realized it's all about establishing trust in data. And when we have trust in data, I'm reading this book called The Speed of Trust by Covey. He says the speed of getting things done correctly goes up and the costs invariably go down. So it's a great formula. And, I'm all about leveraging high trust for accelerating growth.
Thank you, Marla. Mike, can we hear a bit about yourself?
Sure, Mark. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. Mike Pickard. I'm a director in our technical sales solution architecture practice here at Informatica, and I have the privilege of working with customers that really span a variety of industries, including financial services. So working with some of the largest financial institutions to smaller, medium-sized firms. It's very exciting time, obviously, to be in data. It's always an exciting time. And personally, I find that a lot of the commonalities and things that have always led towards success, certainly there's an adaptation and a different way of thinking about it in the context of AI. But the good news is for data professionals, I think our role continues to be and will only be more important as we head forward into this new age of AI. So looking forward to a good conversation today.
Great stuff. And Alpesh.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alpesh Doshi. I've worked in data for about 20 years, run data programs in banking and finance. And amongst other things, I run an investment firm called Redcliffe Capital, and we invest in AI-first companies. And being an AI-first investor, one of the biggest areas is data and how data fits into that. And as all of us know, without decent data, there is no decent AI.
Well said. Thank you all for that. So let's get started with an audience poll. First one, you should be able to see it on Slido now on your screen. How far has your company moved towards implementing a robust data governance strategy for AI? And there are 4 options there. If you can get voting now, we'll start with our first panel question. And the first one is, why is it necessary to ensure good quality data for AI applications? And Mike, do you want to get the ball rolling?
Sure, Mark. I mean, the way that I see it is that when you look at the output of AI, fundamentally it's based off of the data. That could be the data that the model itself is trained or fine-tuned on, or the data that's brought to the context of that point of interaction with the AI. And I think what strikes me is there's a level of consistency when you survey executives, probably Alpesh and Marla. I'm sure you've been surveyed by firms getting your input on this question. There's a level of consistency that the biggest obstacle, what's holding back, like faster adoption, broader adoption of AI initiatives, it's really issues with the data. I saw an article that was released yesterday by McKinsey where they'd been measuring some of the obstacles to AI, and they've been measuring this for over a year now, which gives some nice ability to look back and see what's changing, what's trending. Data issues, right? Inaccuracy was continuing to be the largest obstacle, and that graph was only going up and to the right. So this isn't something that people are feeling like it's getting less of a problem. It's something that's becoming more potentially of an obstacle as organizations continue to move forward in their AI journey. And that really matches our experience working with customers as well. At Informatica, we conducted a survey of the global CDO population where issues with data continues to be identified as the most significant impediment to AI. So I think I like the way you summarized it, Alpesh. We say something very similar here at Informatica itself, which is, I think everyone's ready and eager for AI, but the question we all have to ask ourselves is our data, essentially ready for AI to drive the types of outputs that we're looking for?
Alpesh, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think adding to what Mike said, one of the key areas around data is with the advent of large language models and using internal data as part of the life cycle of leveraging LLMs across many use cases, things like reg compliance or reg reporting or all sorts of things. One of the biggest challenges is if you can't organize, structure, and solve the data quality problems, then feeding those through LLMs, large language models, is really not going to help you get better results or get more accurate results. So, one of the biggest challenges is firms trying to finally, Maria will know, one of the biggest challenges a CDO is responsible for is data quality and data governance and getting that right. And I've worked in data for, as I said, a long time. And we're 20 years in, let's say 10, 15 years in around the whole big data and CDO world. And we're still right at the beginning. I mean, in financial institutions, we're still right at the beginning. It still hasn't been solved. And with the ambition and with the promise of what large language models are going to do to financial institutions and the opportunity that it provides, it's now become imperative that actually people do something. People really haven't done a lot with it. And part of the challenge has also been the cost. So one of the challenges is how do you actually, in a cost-effective way, in a timely way, fix the data quality issues? And that's one of the biggest challenges I've seen. The return on investment just hasn't stacked up. And therefore, it hasn't, people haven't invested. But secondly, also, the business cases haven't stacked up. If you want to fix data quality across every single market, every single system, we're talking hundreds of millions or billions, even depending on the organization. And no one wants to invest that kind of money. They just can't see the ROI. They forget. And I've been in trading environments where there are breaks in STP processes because the data was wrong and it's cost the bank hundreds of millions because of that. And people just still don't understand that if you don't fix it, this is going to cause problems. So it's a perennial problem. But with the promise of LLMs, hopefully that's going to change things.
Fingers crossed. Well, before we go into sort of dive down into some of the details there, let's take a look at the poll results. I think you can see that, and this looks like a fairly convincing win in the planning stage.
Wow.
Any thoughts on those results, Marla?
Yeah. I'm a little surprised actually that planning stage is really taking the lead there. I would think that, we'd be, closer to well established, but I guess it is kind of the second runner up there. I would think most companies, should have, at least robust data governance established by now or kind of well on their way. And I would say, agreeing with Alpesh, I've been in data management and governance for over 10 years now. And when it first started, we were really leading with transparency. That was what was going with the regulators. But now that LLMs come into it, data quality, I think, has outpaced, not that we're not doing catalogs anymore, or transparency, but data quality as a priority has really outpaced transparency at this point. And I've seen a big shift to focus on data quality. So yeah, I'm a bit surprised at the results, but just keep plugging away. I'll give another plug. I wrote a book on data analytics and digital transformation, and in the book we predict by 2030, data governance, programs, robust data governance should be fully established in most companies. So we'll see if that happens. Keep plugging away.
Right. And Mike, there's about a third of people either haven't yet thought about it, only just begun. Is that significant?
Yeah, I mean, I think this reflects what we see when we work with organizations. Some are much further along, obviously, in either execution or planning. Obviously, everyone's attendance here means you're thinking about it, obviously. And I think we'll learn over the course of today's discussion some of the fundamentals or best practices, especially for that 19% that either haven't thought about it yet or just beginning. So I think there's a lot of things that we'll be able to share there, as well as insights for people in the other areas of readiness.
Right. So for those companies that are low down on that chart there, what are the disadvantages of not getting it right? And for everybody, actually, what are the disadvantages of not getting data right? Alpesh, any thoughts?
How long do we have?
I had the same thought.
I could give you loads of them. The things like, financial and business implications, things like, financial losses. I mentioned financial losses already. Being able to help operational efficiency is a really big one. If you don't get your data right, as I'm sure some of us know, financial institutions have been fined by the regulator, basically. You need to fix your data because it's really bad, and there's like a remediation and a very close eye by the regulator on the financial institutions. And actually, financial institutions don't like that. They don't like being scrutinized to that level to prove things. And sometimes, these things take potentially years because they haven't really paid attention to it. And now the regulators come in and saying, "Oi, fix this." They've got no choice but to fix it. And that obviously causes reputational ethical risks. And it's a shame, really, because when firms are forced to take an action, that's when a lot of these things start to have them, data governance. It meant data governance strategy. Data governance has not been something that people want to do, and they go, "What the hell is it, and why do I need it?" And it's really difficult for a CDO to try and explain that, but over and over again, you see it. You see the problems. You see the problems over and over again, and like, look, this is why. This is why, and people just don't understand it. So it's an interesting dynamic on how this has evolved over the last 20 years. That people are forced to do it, and that's why they're doing it. And I'm hoping with the advent of large language models and the excitement boards have around this, and actually boards going out in public saying, "We're doing AI." And of course, they're not really, but they're saying, "We're doing AI." That's forcing the board to think of it more seriously, hoping that the data quality challenges will be fixed.
And Mike, any thoughts there? You were nodding along.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved your initial reaction, Alpesh. How long do we have on this topic? I'll look at it from, a related lens, which is operational inefficiencies, right? I had a colleague who was just at a CIO event in San Francisco, and, without going into too much detail, one of the stories that was shared there was one of the larger firms here in the US. They, within, this quarter, the quarter that we're in Q1 right now, they kicked off a large Gen AI initiative, actually brought it to the point of deploying it out within their firm. Within 5 days, they had to take it back down and offline because they were seeing the outputs that were coming out of this for some of their internal processing just weren't, sufficient. They were causing issues. They were not essentially meeting the intended business purpose. So I think if you don't get it right up front, obviously you're going to misallocate your resources, and also you'll have an erosion of trust within the company and perhaps resistance to, future initiatives. So I think certainly in addition to regulatory and other external pressures, even within the organization itself if you don't get it right, right? You're going to have misallocation and perhaps false starts in this space.
Can I just chime in there, Mark, for a minute? Because I would come at it from a commercialization perspective, similar to what Alpesh said, right? You know, the operational and the financial risks. I mean, imagine, you know, making critical business decision for weeks on a dashboard that has bad data, you know, before those issues are even discovered. So, you know, the missed opportunities of investing and making good decisions based on good data is lost. And then the cost of fixing those weeks worth of data instead of at least, you know, 1 or 2 days of data by identifying it earlier on, you know, are big disadvantages, right, for not getting it right. And to everybody's point, you know, that you'll get erosion of trust in your AI models if you're continually making decisions based on bad data. So
thanks, Marla. Yeah, you're right, Alpesh. We could have a whole webinar devoted to that one question, I think.
yeah, indeed.
Okay, let's go into another poll. This time we're asking, where do you see most promise in the implementation of AI applications? While you're deliberating on that, we'll go to our next question. What are the particular data attributes that need to be right for AI? You know, let's get into the details now. So Alpesh, again, what would you say? Sorry, Alpesh, you're on.
I was on mute. I apologize. I mean, accuracy and quality is a big one. You know, what I know from my experience around large language models is, you know, if you use, I'm not going to talk technical, but if you're feeding data and attaching it to a model, and I say attach intentionally because you don't add it to the model, you attach it to the model. If the accuracy isn't correct, it may give misleading information and misleading output. That Mike has already indicated that, you know, where what you see is if you're not training, if you're not adding the data to the model, or sorry, attaching it to the model well, that those things really can prevent the right kind of output. Things like if you're dealing with you know, if you're dealing with things like consumer data and you're providing, for example, chatbots and advice on customer service, and you could, for example, have bias challenges or other kinds of risk, air quality challenges. And if you're in the EU, then the EU AI Act is here, and therefore, you know, the regulators are overseeing this stuff and going, or you've got to be fair. If some of you have seen the EU AI Act, obviously in the US, you probably haven't. You will see that there's reasonably stringent criteria, and you have to prove that. And if we then talk about the regulator, whether it's the ECB or the FCA in the UK, you know, they're starting to scrutinize this stuff on how are you using it, how are you doing the output, and explainability of the output is also important. So if you can't have the ability to explain that well and actually accurate and complete, there's a bunch of challenges there as well. So being able to get completeness, correctness, timeliness. So, you know, if you're doing a report and the data is stale, so using an older version of, I don't know, a financial report, for example, those things can definitely bite you as well. So there are a number of different, I can talk more, but hopefully that sort of gives a flavor of some of the attributes that you need to consider.
Yeah, that's great. Mike, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Alpesh, you summarized a lot of the things that we think about too, as well here at Informatica. Certainly, from a data attribute perspective, I think starting just as you said, Alpesh, with what are the inputs that we're essentially going to be reliant on to feed into this AI process. We need to understand what are the expectations of those, and really have the right controls in place, automated controls that help us understand and assess and measure those data elements so that we can understand what's coming into our model. Is it essentially conformant to the expectations that we've designed this business process around? And then also measure the output as well. We've talked a little bit about the risks of bias or inaccurate AI outcomes. So I think when we think about data quality, we think obviously about what's coming into the AI process, and then also obviously monitoring and having a process around what's coming out of it.
Let's look at the results of the second poll now. Are they there? streamlined workflows is the use case that AI is showing most promise according to our audience. Marla, any thoughts on these results?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I would say streamline workflows, and maybe, lead to cost reduction. So I see those two. And I think that's what, where folks are focused on now, and getting the most value out of it now, right, with the cost reductions. But I think I would say that, I'd say that the most promise really would come from that value creation and creating new products, and innovation, right? So there's a lot of promise there. Of course, it has to rely on trusted data, right?
Thank you. Okay, next question. What processes are necessary to ensure data's quality for AI? Mike, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think ensuring and monitoring data quality is vital, especially and certainly within the financial services industry. And there's a few ways of looking at this. We see organizations that take a more centralized approach, organizations that take a more federated approach. But I think when you look at it and you boil it down to the essentials of what that data quality framework would look like. I think it starts off with the ability to, have a solid understanding of your data. Metadata, obviously, what are the various places where the data resides, and then creating a reusable set and an understanding, whether that's rules-based or perhaps AI initiated set of rules to essentially monitor and understand those data elements, regardless of where they're sourced from. So I think a data profiling and a data enrichment, a data cleansing framework to understand, real-time insights about the data that's being used or relied upon for these processes to ensure that data is remaining reliable, accurate. And when you think about scaling this out as well, Alpesh, you made a really good point earlier on, right? We can't start from the premise of we need to implement data quality everywhere for everything, right? It's fundamentally going to be driven by what are the needs. And Marla, I like the language and the perspective that you're using, which is like it's all about, at the end of the day, creating value. That could be new products. In some cases, that could be streamlining internal processes as well. So building out that robust framework that allows you to apply data quality rules consistently, have a level of visibility into what those data elements are, an understanding of where they're being sourced from, how they're flowing through the organization. And that's really what we focus on with the Informatica platform and the capabilities that we collaborate on with our customers.
Okay. And Alpesh, what's your experience here? What would you say are the processes necessary to ensure data's quality?
It's interesting because what it said about going back to the poll, it was talking about workflows. It's quite interesting, actually, because as I'm sure all of us know, one of the biggest challenges has been trying to build a team, trying to get the processes efficient to do the data quality checks or build data quality metrics you can measure, etc. Right? And it's basically based on tools like Informatica provide, but also large numbers of people with those tools. And what I'm seeing, actually, from an investment perspective, you can literally shortcut that by using LLMs. You can use large language models to actually do your data quality. So rather than doing the traditional processes that you're doing today to data quality, you can push a lot of the data quality challenges through an LLM with a bunch of work and actually get the data fixed. Now that is completely new. As I said, I've worked in data for 20 plus years, and I've never seen the ability to do that in an efficient and cost-effective way. And it's always been a challenge to do it. And LLMs, actually, large language models and Gen AI, is helping solve the data quality problems. And it mentioned workflows. I'm trying to think of the context that people are meeting by workflows. But with large language models and the use of those things, the traditional workflow approaches just disappear. Because if you're using things like agents, you're pushing into an agent, here's what I want to do. And the agent works out what to do and does it for you. So you don't need a workflow tool because it works it out for you. So even in the data quality process, you can actually reinvent how you do data quality. So it's a fascinating time. And I'm seeing quite a lot of that. It's very, very early. It's even earlier than using LLMs for lots of other use cases. but I'm seeing the ability to do lots of things you couldn't do quickly and easily that you never be able to do. So for example, just one example, data standardization. How do you take data which is not standardized and get it standardized in a particular way? Where today it's manual, you have to do mappings, Informatica have lots of tools, all that kind of stuff. In the future, you won't need to do any of that. You just push it through a model, it'll work it out for you and give you an answer, and you've basically shortcut the process.
Well, you've anticipated the next question there, Alpesh, which is, what roles do standardization and mastering play in vouchsafing the integrity and validity of data? Vouchsafing.
If you don't mind, Mark, I'd just like to jump on the back of Alpesh's comment there too. And Alpesh, it's really interesting to hear your perspective, and I think it aligns with where, you know, we're also seeing those needs evolve and shift to as well. And it really boils down, I think, to two words: metadata and automation, right? Fundamentally, whether you're using an independent LLM or you're using some of the inbuilt capabilities, understanding, you know, the context of that data and being able to route it through the engine to perhaps assess it and cleanse it. So one of the capabilities that we've been working with a lot of our organizations on is essentially taking that inventory of the data assets and then feeding it through an LLM. We obviously deploy our own technology within the Informatica stack as well. So the point isn't lost on me, right? It's not feasible always to do a top-down rules-based approach, and you know, we're seeing that, and I'm sure the industry is obviously evolving towards it. So in the Informatica point of view, obviously embracing automation to drive the data quality process is key to where we're seeing the market evolve towards as well.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, sorry for interrupting me. But Alpesh did touch on the question of standardization, and our next question is, and it ties in with the question asked by one of the audience members as well, which is, what roles do standardization and mastering play in vouchsafing the integrity and validity of data? Alpesh, you've made some comment, but can we go to Marla first to cast some light on this?
Sure, a couple of new things here. LLMs for data quality, that's a new one for me, as well as vouchsafing. I had to look that one up. Guaranteeing accuracy and protection. So throw it all at me, why not? But yeah, you know, data standardization really and master data management, you know, it plays a key role, right, in ensuring the integrity and validity of data, right? High trust data, you get high trust AI outcomes and lower costs. I keep repeating that. But what you get from that standardization and master data management, right, is the accuracy and consistency, as Alpesh mentioned, right? Structured and formatted data is consistent across systems and environments, you know, reduces discrepancies. And what you get from that is a single source of truth, right? An authoritative version, you know, of critical data where everybody's operating off of the same playbook, and they can go to one place. You can do your data quality all in one place. You can put your policies and affect those policies all in one place. So now you have, you know, trust in this data, you know, which creates trust for regulatory compliance, as well as obviously trust in your analytics and your AI models.
Yeah, trust, important word there. Alpesh, would you like to expand on some of your comments you made earlier about standardization?
Yeah. I mean, I think, so this is where my technology hat comes out, and around standardization. So if we look at how standardization has worked, is you build a data catalog and you say item meaning, and you try and have that uniform across the organization. And frankly, that's never worked, you know, in the times that in the time I've been involved in data, and that's a long time, that's never worked. I think what I've seen is it's now the advent of semantic models or knowledge graphs. So that stuff has been around since I did a project in one of the big banks in London in 2007 and 8, and I was talking about knowledge graphs and semantic models then, and everybody just looked at me and go, "What the hell are you talking about? What is this stuff?" Interestingly, it's now come around where using things like knowledge graphs, and I don't know how much of the audience know about knowledge graphs, but reach out to me if you want to know about knowledge graphs. The interesting thing is those things are now coming back because attaching knowledge graphs to a large language model and using, you know, going back to what I said about using LLMs for data quality, that now can help on creating standardized output and building knowledge graphs around financial markets and financial instruments, for example. And therefore, standardization isn't about saying, here's the fields, here's the comment, but actually the underlying semantics and understanding the connections between the data is a very different approach, which is now doable as a business case and an ROI. Until recently, until LLMs came along, it would take years and years and years to actually build a knowledge graph and a semantic model by hand. The business case didn't stack up. And most of this stuff has happened in the life sciences sector, where big pharmaceutical companies like AstraZeneca spent literally years building their fantastic knowledge graph for their businesses. But in financial services, it just really hasn't happened because it's just been too costly. So I'm sort of giving a slightly different perspective on data standardization, which is it's not about building tables of fields with a name and a description, but actually using a knowledge graph where you connect data and the meaning of that data together, which really removes the ambiguity and allows you to basically solve the biggest data quality challenges that have existed and still do.
Right. Yep. I think our audience is quite knowledgeable on the knowledge graphs, and if they want,
That's good news. That's good news.
Let's take a couple of questions from the audience, and one that struck me was the question, and I'll throw it open to anybody that finds it interesting as well. It seems to me that high quality data for AI is no different than high quality data for any other use. If this isn't the case, how is it different? Who would like to speak first on that?
I don't think it is different.
Right.
The important thing is that until recently, it's been hard to get a business case through that people will attach to where there's a business benefit or a specific outcome. The difference has been now with LLMs coming along, everybody's woken up to it. Oh, if you have shit data, you're going to get LLMs are pointless. And, Mike already mentioned a classic example where somebody didn't think about it and they had to turn the thing off. So what I've seen is, because now everybody's interested in large language models and the impact they're going to have in an organization, the board is now going, oh, well, we'll give you some money for that. And you're attaching it to that set of use cases rather than good data is really great. You should really do it. And I'm sure Maria's been, has board conversations and senior exec conversations trying to convince people, And I think, and it's really, really hard. I know this from, kind of interactions I have. It's just so hard trying to convince people around data governance and data quality. It's just so hard because over years, people just don't buy the business case. They don't buy it. And everybody says data is the, what is it? Data is the fuel, or whatever the people say. Data is a strategic asset. The reality is it's not. It hasn't been. People, how much they say this, they don't mean it. And now it's actually going to be a strategic asset because that's the IP. So one of the things, in terms of a business case, one of the great things with this is if you fix your data, you've got a bunch of IP as your firm, which is unique to your firm. So, for example, it could be a trading strategy. It could be research where you've got unstructured data that you've got humongous amounts of. That is IP that you can then now use to build a unique service offering and a unique perspective. So it's come around in the sense that now there's a business case you can hang it off, which has always been a problem.
Okay, I guess a slightly connected question from the audience as well is, given the importance of AI, do you see the CDO's role within enterprises becoming more powerful, or at least being brought closer to the board if they're not already in the board? Marla, you're nodding there.
Yeah, I definitely, we definitely see that, in the industry. So the role of the CDO is expanding, right? And many times it's now being called CDAO, with the bringing analytics into the core CDO organization, right? As well as you see it start moving closer towards boards. So originally a lot of times it was nestled under technology areas. Often it's now located within the operations world, but even at JP Morgan, recently in the last year or so, you've seen the CDAO role elevated to the board level, equivalent to the CFO and the COO. So,
yeah, and you think that the importance of AI is driving that?
Absolutely, yeah. And to your point, Alpesh, before, I think data has always been an asset. It might not have been an acknowledged asset. And so I agree that making those business cases are difficult. And it really comes, and the data is the same as far as a quality perspective goes. I agree with that as well. It's just the pace, the exponential pace. It's been going at pace for a long time, but now it's even that much more, and getting hands around your data quality because of the pace of the outcomes that are coming out is just becoming more important. And they're starting to realize it now. And to your point, Alpesh, investing in it.
Mike?
If I may, yeah, Marla, it was interesting to hear you talk about obviously the CDAO role. We were just meeting last week with a CDAO at a wealth management firm, and there's a lot of interest and excitement around like how we can embed generative AI for the advisors or potentially customer facing. And the reality, right, that we were discussing was that we're not yet at the point of readiness to have a clean, consistent view of the customer with all their accounts necessarily. So when we think about vouchsafing, I also equally had to look up exactly what that was relating to. From a master data management perspective, I think when you think about bringing the context of data to an AI model, right, the critical things that we think about a customer and their view of accounts or a product, right, and how it's related to particular data assets. If you don't have a solid and mastered view of that entity, you're either going to have an incomplete picture, perhaps duplicated data that's providing inaccurate or incomplete information. So I think understanding and mastering your critical data elements is going to essentially be really the lifeblood of feeding some of that contextual information to the AI at the point of decisioning.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. We'll go back to the audience questions if we have some time. We'll move on to our panel questions. What governance features would need to be implemented, and why are they so important in this in achieving good quality data? Mike.
Yeah, it's been interesting hearing your perspective on this, Alpesh, in terms of new ways of approaching or thinking about the problem. And I mentioned these two words before, but I think they're worth repeating. Even if you look at feeding in your data estate, your data into an LLM for the purposes of data quality or building out a knowledge graph, it fundamentally starts with, where is the data, understanding it from a metadata perspective. So I think going back to metadata and automation, having that framework to define and understand your data, the intent of it, the usage of it, rules that might govern it, and then whether you use an engine that is more rules-based or an engine that could infer from the data itself and apply standardization enrichment, describing and understanding where that data quality is essentially being monitored and controlled for the purposes of ongoing attestation. One of the things that we see too is that, especially on the cutting edge of a lot of these AI initiatives, there is a fair amount of employee movement, right, from firm to firm. So you don't want to be in a position where you've developed and implemented some sort of AI process, and then the most knowledgeable people about that process and how it's sourcing data, how it's essentially controlling the quality and the inputs of that data is that context leaves the organization. So I think having a framework and a way to document and understand the intent of it, essentially the governance aspect of AI and the data around it itself, is a critical part of the equation here as well.
Marla, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So that was interesting. I agree, Alpesh, on bringing knowledge graph into it. And I think it's a great vision, and companies are working on it, and it's there. I think in most organizations, they still have their master data management systems in place, their tables, and to Mike's point, client master data management and product master data management are big focuses in firms. And then to fully integrate that really with data governance, you need, a couple of things, from the question on features, data domain strategy, right? Data ownership, data stewardship, knowing who's owning the data, what are the rules around that data, is key to integrating those tools. Automated data quality monitoring as well, right? Accurate data, once you have the data standardized within your master data management system, that accurate data strengthens that standardization that you get from that. And then you have your single source of truth. You can put that roles-based access and policies for that protection part of vouchsafing, right? And enforce it at the MDM level because you have it as a single source of truth, protecting that data from unauthorized access. And then, I've heard metadata management, a little bit more about lineage as well, right? Being able to track the origins of the data, the classifications, the transformations are also important features to integrate.
Yep. Go on, Alpesh.
Yeah, I'd love to make a comment on that. I mean, one of the things that's emerging over the last probably 18 months is the concept of a data product. So, one of the things that I've seen is if we take all the things that Marie has said, Mike has said about, and they're all valid things, I think one of the ideas and one of the sort of newish things that have emerged is the concept of a data product and being able to shift around. So one of the things that I've seen happen is if you go to any team and say, can I have your data? They go, what for? Why do you need it? Why do you want to use it? And it's always this battle between the guys who have the data and the guys who want it, and they don't want to reveal it. Using data products shifts it completely, where what you're doing now is you're a service provider. Your team is a service provider of data, and you're offering data products with a service level. Say, I guarantee this data is like this, and it's available to use. So you're shifting the responsibility and the politics. I always say data is politics. It's always been like that. Data is politics. It's always been political. People are always very, very fussy about their data. It's my data and you can't have it, But this shifts the dynamic and shifts the approach where you are now responsible for providing high quality data products in a certain way with governance to external parties. You have an SLA to make sure that you are providing that data product that other people can consume and make sure that it's correct, etc. So shifting the way this works, I think, can help actually move forward with solving some of the challenges that we've seen.
Yeah, if I may, just quickly reacting to that, I also love that concept and that term of a data product or an internal data marketplace where there's, a contract or SLAs. And also that last mile too. That's one thing that we've heard consistently from a lot of our customers that we work with, right? Even if they have a solid data governance framework, solid data quality rules, if they don't have a provisioning strategy for making that data accessible, either for building AI initiatives or providing it to the point of consumption for operationalization. So that last leg sometimes of provisioning and securing the data is equally important. So that's an initiative that we're seeing across a lot of our customers too, organizing their data around data products with defined characteristics, usage policies, et cetera, and then going up all the way to the point of automated provisioning and access to that data as well. And that's those are the types of initiatives that we're seeing and helping a lot of organizations with as well.
Yeah, I would chime in on that and just kind of wrap it all together in a term that I like to use as a data marketplace, right? So you have your MDM and, and your quality and all of it built in. And then the roles-based access, right, all comes from, and it can be consolidated into your data marketplace for discoverability as long as your data is clean. Mm-hmm.
And data marketplaces will take a prominent role in our DMS next week. So come along and watch. Let's go into another poll now. Where are you experiencing the biggest challenges in guaranteeing data quality for AI? And you can answer on your Slido panel now. Before we go to those results, Marla, what would you say are the challenges to achieving the goals, of getting good data, good quality data for AI?
Yeah, I'd always start with siloed data. So any part of any good, data governance program is going to look to, kind of break down those silos, bring in the critical data into your MDM, right? All the legacy system, disparate platforms all over, you have to, kind of focus on what is your critical and bring it together. The second thing I would say, resistance to change is always a challenge, right? People are comfortable with their status quo. They want to keep doing what they've been doing, but things are moving too quickly, and organization needs to be put in place for your data in order to keep up, as Alpesh mentioned. So, and then the last thing I'd say, scalability, integration, complexity. across, multiple cloud, on-prem, hybrid environments, and kind of, bringing it all together through the integrations are some of the challenges.
Great stuff. And Alpesh, where do you see the challenges?
The challenge is, wow, I mean, there's so many.
Another webinar.
I think Maria's sort of hinted on some of them. But...
Marla.
Oh, it's Marla. I'm sorry. And the thing is that it looked like an eye. I'm sorry. Sorry, Marla. I've been saying your name wrong all the way through. I apologize. Really apologize. Sorry, Marla.
No.
I think, there's so many challenges, but I think changing the way you see, changing the, some people have talked about this around culture. It's been so hard. However much people say data is a strategic asset and people think about data and using data, the reality is culturally, people are not trained to think about doing things with data. They still aren't. I've been doing this 15 years in data or more. Just people assume that everybody knows about data and what you should do with using it. And it's like, no, they don't. They don't know. They don't have that understanding of what the value of data could really be to what they do. And the ones that do really accelerate their change, accelerate the improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've seen. What firms, frankly, need to do is think about how do they change a culture within their organization and actually provide huge amounts of change to think about data differently and actually provide the tools, provide the training, provide incentives. So interestingly, a few years ago, I was dealing with somebody from GSK. This is not in financial services. And GSK, what they'd done is everybody in the organization had a metric on their performance every 6 months around how did they improve data and use data in their business. So that incentivization was, hey, your bonus and your rewards are based upon that metric. That changed the dynamic of how people thought about data because now it was part of their comp and it was part of their performance. It changed the way everybody thought about it. Right. And I think this kind of thing can really drive, it's trying to, how do you drive behavioral change? Saying use data is like, yeah, okay. But this kind of thing that GSK did actually changed behaviors because they incentivized people to do it. And it was measured well. And people are incentivized either from better performance or better pay or whatever. Right. And that will change behaviors. Right. So I think these kind of things are really the way to make changes happen. Cultural change is so hard. And with LLMs coming along, it's like, it's going to really impact this. And there's lots of others, but things like security and privacy is a big one. Integration, interoperability, still not there. Integration is so poor. There's a lot of complexity around integration. And the reality is, if you're a large firm, you don't really know how things work. I'm an architect by background. And if you go and say, hey, let's model the current state, like you never model the current state accurately because frankly, it's just too hard because there's no documentation. Everything sort of just works. And you say, well, okay, tell me how it works. I go, well, I just do it. Like, well, okay. and for me, this is, there you go. There's lots of more, but I'm going to let Marla.
Marla, yes, Marla wants to follow up.
There you go.
No, I was just raising my finger. I say you have to cross fingers to make sure that it's all working, right? You can't really operate that way anymore, though. So, yeah.
Okay, well, shall we see what our poll voters, what their pain points are? And data sourcing and data cleansing, neck and neck. Any surprise there, Mike?
No, I mean, I think this ties back into what we were talking about a few minutes back with the idea of that data marketplace or data products. Data sourcing really is fundamentally tied in with the concept of delivering a data product or a data marketplace. You're going to have potentially automated provisioning or delivery processes around that if you build that into your data strategy. And data cleansing obviously goes hand in hand with that. If you're defining a data product that has known standards and SLAs around it, those would typically also include commitments to certain data quality elements or rules being implicitly defined and attested to within that data as well. So it makes sense to me, absolutely.
And yeah, and Alpesh, are you? Is there anything
Yeah,
stand out to you?
I'm trying to understand. I don't know whether you guys understand it, but what do they mean by data sourcing? Do they mean I need to solve a particular business problem and I'm trying to find the data to help me solve it? Is that what the question was about? Is it sourcing
Yeah,
external data?
I would think external data coming in, that's
yeah.
what I would call it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think let's be honest, the market data world and sourcing data over the last, most firms have multiple licenses for the same data source in multiple departments. If you've got a really good market data team, then and have a decent set of tools to do discovery, you should be able to find all the data you need. And obviously, it sounds like actually most people don't have that. So there we go.
I would just chime in quickly also. I agree with, I can understand why those two came up first, that people are still working on that. But you saw unstructured data is a close third on those. Those two were neck and neck, so I'd almost call it second. And we've been ignoring unstructured data and data management for years, right? Just focusing on structured. But now, to Alpesh's point, that LLMs are there, it's forcing us to consider what mingling structured and unstructured data will do to our outcomes. So, I see in the future unstructured.
80% of all data in organizations is unstructured data. And so if I can make a little point on that one of the biggest areas I think there's a really large opportunity to fix things is in compliance. AML, KYC and compliance, there's a huge amounts of content sitting around in unstructured data in documents. And with the advent of LLMs, you really can mine that and use that. Really, you can mine that stuff. And I think if you take compliance and unstructured data together with LLMs, I think that's a whole new discipline that's going to emerge.
Gotcha. Excellent, Alpesh. Well, you both touched on the subject of our next two DMI webinars. So unstructured data and regulatory reporting. Well, this has been fascinating, but we're kind of running out of time. So I'd like to go to each of you and ask for any of your final thoughts on, how you can see this, solving for this going forward. Let's start with Mike.
Sure. So I think for the audience listening in, just going back to that first poll question where people at different phases of their, adoption with AI within their enterprise, I think wherever you are in this journey, understanding your strategy around data, we've talked about different ways of organizing that, whether it's towards data products or knowledge graphs or an understanding that perhaps uses a approach that's centered around metadata and automation. So I think really defining what that strategy is going to be, looking at what your initial targets are for AI. We looked at that second poll, and a lot of it was around workflow processing. Some of it was around value creation and improved customer experience. And just thinking about what's that domain of data or the domains of data that's going to be associated with that process. And then just making sure that you have the capabilities in place to create a robust framework that not only feeds the needs of that particular initiative, but sets you up for the next one and the one beyond that. And in our point of view, that typically encompasses a lot of the disciplines and the capabilities that we've talked about here today, starting with, understanding your current data, profiling it, whether using, automated or rules-based approaches, getting an inventory of it, whether that's in, more traditional format or a knowledge graph, and understanding how it's flowing through the organization, understanding the current state of that data and applying rules to standardize it, enrich it, whether again through a more traditional process or using perhaps AI or LLMs as part of that cleansing or standardization process. Informatica is obviously investing in that space. We have our CLAIRE GPT engine that is now metadata aware and contextual and can inventory and assess data assets and suggest and apply automated data quality rules as well. And then thinking about, again, we talked about the importance of customer, of product, providing that accurate, clean view of those critical data elements that are robust and fully represent the reality of that important entity to the business. And then finally, organizing that last leg, which what we hear from our customers is sometimes the most challenging part. Once you have that data pipeline and you have a data product potentially that can be consumable and feed into your AI initiatives or just in general usage for analytics, how do you put together a framework around that that enables robust and controlled and governed experimentation? So provisioning that data out whether we're talking about for the purposes of prototyping or having that framework to then operationalize it, and integration often with some of these LLMs or the processes that can automate these LLMs.
Thank you, Mike. And Marla, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think, where is this all leading to, right? And what does success look like after all of these initiatives? And to me, I think, success means that, data is no longer a liability, but it's a competitive advantage. And to Alpesh's point, getting a whole organization to understand that data is a competitive advantage and to invest in all the pieces that we need to get it into a state where we can take advantage of it is where we're headed forward. And I think we're going to see a lot more coming, leveraging AI tools for governance that are going to make this and data quality that are going to make things a lot easier and a lot more streamlined going forward. And then as well as AI governance for models themselves. So, getting that foundation of data governance in place is really enabling, developing a full, end-to-end data AI governance life cycles well. And I'll just share that, I'm partnering with Manchester University on a new AI governance research study. It's going to be published this summer, so stay tuned for more of that.
Thanks, my alma mater. Thank you, Marla. And Alpesh, final words from you.
I would just, rethink how this works. The current things, the way the things have been done so far just haven't worked. Let's be honest, right? They just haven't worked. If 15 years ago when I started my first data project, if things had worked well, we wouldn't have these problems we have today, and we'd be able to just smooth into using large language models. The reality is that hasn't happened. So for me, it's around rethinking how you do this, rethinking the process, rethinking the architecture, rethinking the tools, rethinking the approach. And for me, that's where the opportunity is now, is to do things differently. And now the capabilities are there to do it, and the incentives are there to do it. And that's why we're investing in companies, AI first businesses and data businesses, because we see the opportunity to build ventures and build companies, but also the new companies are going to come along with these new approaches. And for me, that's really exciting.
Yeah. Thank you, Alpesh, and thank you, Mike, and thank you, Marla. That wraps up the webinar, and I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Informatica. But before we close, just a quick reminder of some of the things I told you about at the beginning of the webinar. We've got our Data Management Summit London next week, and there are still a few places left, so come along and join in. Our next data management webinar will be on March 27th, and that will be focused on unstructured data. And in early May, we'll have our best practice approaches to data management for regulatory reporting. So I hope you can join us all for those. And until then, goodbye.